The Samsung Galaxy S24 Plus has been on the market since early 2024. We're only a couple months away from the iPhone 15 Pro getting upgraded to the 16 Pro. I had the S24 Plus for well over 6 months. I want to go ahead and share with you my long-term months later update between these two competitive phones in the S24 Plus and the iPhone 15 Pro. So what is up, guys? Nick here, helping you to master your technology. Now let's talk about initially right away the price. So the price of the Samsung phone typically is less due to trade-ins, discounts, and carrier subsidies, stuff like that. Usually you'll find the Samsung less. If you pay full retail for a S24 Plus, you're probably not making the wisest decision, because if you just look around, you'll usually find it cheaper. The con of the Samsung, though, even though it's a great phone, usually comes in cheaper than the iPhone 15 Pro. Even though their retail is about the same, you can usually get it cheaper. The con is the resale value. Later in the year, when you want to go get rid of this thing right here, you either trade it to Samsung or you're getting a horrible resale. That's the problem with it. So don't be fooled by the initial sticker of this phone, because later on, you're going to find out why it was cheaper. It's mostly due to the resale value, because Samsung knows they have a phone that's nearly equal in terms of the body, the build, the overall phone, but they also know they don't have the same brand as Apple, who could just sell and sell and sell, and then when you resell, sell for even higher. As a matter of fact, sometimes they'll actually give you more for your iPhone than their own Samsungs on trade-in. Sometimes, not always. But if you do trade in the Samsung, you usually get a really good deal. Now, for the iPhone 15 Pro, all these months later, you don't really find this thing on sale. You find refurbished, secondhand, some with scratches, open box, things of that sort. You could find them like that, but they're not brand new. Brand new, you're usually always paying full retail until the next iPhone comes out. So the iPhone 15 Pro definitely commands a higher price tag. But again, it's Pro is that when you go to sell it, you can easily retain most of its value, especially if you do it within the first year or two. Wait a little bit longer, the iPhones start to tank in value, but they take a longer time to do so. So months later, when it comes to their pure body and build, we are looking at an aluminum frame here, sandwiched around glass on rear and front. You would almost think it's titanium, though, the way they made this aluminum look. It kind of looks like titanium. The back feels like similar to the back of this phone right here. Although I find the Apple one to feel just a little smoother, but that's just a personal preference thing. I also like the frame a little bit more here on the Galaxy S24 Plus. It just feels a little grippier. I feel like I'm going to slip out of my hand with the iPhone 15 Pro a few more times. Maybe it's just me because of the larger size. But in terms of the actual specs of this thing, IP68 dust and water resistance. This does have Gorilla Glass Victus 2 on the front and the rear. And you do not get expandable memory in this body. So if you were looking for that, that's not happening. That's usually on their tablets only now. USB-C, and you'll see the nice vertical camera here. The body is also pretty light at 196 grams. That's only about 9 grams more than this 15 Pro, with a pretty sizable jump in the screen size. This is 6.7 versus 6.1, and it's only 9 grams heavier, which means you're getting nearly a max size phone for at the same weight in the body as the iPhone 15 Pro. So in terms of overall body and build, this has been really, really durable and feels pretty easy to hold on to even without a case due to the flat rails on the edge. I also like this this whole super thin bezel thing they got going on here, and this tiny punch hole, which is much smaller than other phones out there. 6 months later with this one, we have Corning glass on the rear and the front, titanium frame. There are videos that show that the back is pretty easy to crack on this thing, so I've been keeping it in the case. It doesn't have that same strong feel, I feel like, though, as the 14 Pro. I don't know what it is. They just feel a little bit more delicate than before. Maybe it's that stainless steel just felt like a brick. I don't know. It was heavier. But the iPhone 15 Pro has always felt like the same level of quality as the S24 Plus. They both feel at the same level. And the body over here, IP68. This also does not have expandable memory. It does have USB-C for the first time. And we do have ourselves the eSIM, which means no SIM card slot on this phone. I wonder if Apple's the only one who's going to stay that way. I don't really want Samsung to copy that, and they haven't so far. You'll see action button up here and volume rockers. And that action button, they have a Bixby button on here. It doubles as the power button. That doesn't really change the game for me. I know it's useful for a lot of people, but the action button has been a flashlight for me mostly. You could do a lot of shortcuts and stuff with it, but I don't really care much for it. It hasn't become habitual to me just yet. Now, just a quick mention of design. I do think the Samsung is definitely a little bit nicer design due to the punch hole, the thinner bezels, and just kind of looks like a little bit more fresh. They don't look exactly like the S21. I feel like Apple's phone still looks exactly the same as years before, besides the titanium. So it just looks very similar to 14 Pro. It looks pretty similar to 13 Pro, just a dynamic island. So overall, I do think Samsung's looks a little bit more modern, but only by marginally. Samsung's starting to get pretty comfortable too, making similar designs year over year. So I'm not giving them the full credit. I'm just saying the thinner bezels, the punch hole design, this camera right here, just the overall look just looks a little bit more modern to me. This one looks a little bit like 2 years old, 3 years old at this point. So talking about display, I definitely think, especially with that anti-glare screen protector, that the Samsung looks better. With it off, it's still probably a little bit better. Honestly, Samsung makes the displays for iPhone, so why would they put the much better display on the iPhone? The way Apple tunes it, though, was slightly more, I would say, contrasty until Samsung offered the vivid mode. Here, let me make sure the brightnesses are on the same level, though. And you'll see, sure is, hold on, pretty similar. But I mean, you take your pick here in terms of display. I think I know which one I would pick here. Granted, I do have the vivid mode on the Samsung Galaxy S24 Plus, so that could be why it looks so much more vivid right here. But another area is the screen size. So if I zoom in here, months later, I just found that at that similar weight, let me go ahead and zoom the fill. At that similar weight, why would I want a smaller screen size? It just doesn't really make too much sense. So yeah, I would pick the Samsung here in terms of the actual display vividness after the Vivid Slider update. If you don't know what that is, they introduced an update that really allows you to punch up the vivid factor in display settings. So if I go over here, I scroll down to display, I go here, you'll see vivid mode right there. Now also with the edge panels, the abilities to have pop view, the abilities to put this on decks and still have split screen. I mean, the list goes on. There's a lot more versatility with this display as well than what you find on the 15 Pro. Of course, they're bringing you the new customization elements and stuff like that, but there's more versatility on the left. Now, in terms of just pure text sharpness and stuff like that, there's not a big disparity between these two. The Samsung Galaxy actually has a little bit of a sharper resolution at the 3120 by 1440, which was a nice upgrade over the recent version, which they didn't have the 2K display. But this brings us to 513 ppi, so it definitely has a slight advantage over the 15 Pro, which has a 461. They both have the same 19:9 aspect ratio too, which means their width is also pretty good on both, which gives you a nice wide display to consume content. Also, both feature always on display and both have really high brightness capabilities, with the iPhone topping out at about 2000 nits outdoors and the Samsung pushing that even further to around 2600 nits. So all these months later, I can tell you that the Samsung has been the brighter outdoors, the better media experience, the larger, more versatile display than the 15 Pro, all for around the same price. So I can't sit here and just say the iPhone wins. It just can't win in that area. It would be just wrong for me to say that, because factually speaking, you can see it. You can't get around it. The S24 wins this area. Now, software at this point seems like the same thing every year. Samsung, Apple, do you like One UI? Do you like iOS? That's what it comes down to. It's as simple as that. iOS 18 is a nice leap forward, but for Android users, this is nothing really. Like, we've been having this ability to go ahead and put apps wherever you want. We've been having this ability to customize the app colors and stuff like that. Apple's doing it a little bit better, where all the icons are becoming a little bit more colored, but there are ways to do that on Android as well. You just got to tinker a little bit more. But at the end of the day, we've been also on iOS. We've been using Apple. So if we like Apple, then we're not going to want the software over here on the left. But generally, they do about the same things, if we're being honest. They do. They just do them in slightly different ways. The Samsung, though, is definitely the more versatile when it comes to having more features to go ahead and, just mess around with. If we go down here to advanced features, you got labs, you got advanced intelligence, AI. AI is coming to the 15 Pro, but it's been on the Samsung for a while now. So you kind of been able to play with that all year. You got circle to search right here. Just hold this down. So there's a lot of more features going on for the Samsung at this point, but I think that's going to change later this year with iOS 18 official and the new AI stuff. So it'll be a little bit closer then, but still the split screen advantage goes to Samsung. At the end of the day, it's down to personal preference. Months later, sometimes I like using Samsung, sometimes I like using iPhone 15 Pro. All right, in the area of camera, one thing I'm a fan of with the Samsung Galaxy S24 Plus is just its great picture quality and the ability to go 30 times zoom, which is stomping on the iPhone 15 Pro and even the iPhone 15 Pro Max. You can also take 50 megapixel resolution shots. And if you go over here to more, look at all the stuff you could play around with. Pro video, food, night modes, panoramic. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. You can even dual record videos where you record the front and the rear of the phone. That is pretty awesome right there. But months later, I just found this to be a much more versatile setup than this one over here. You also have a super steady mode over here. You can even do 8K video, not at 60, at 30, which is an upgrade over the 24 they used to have. And then the front-facing camera, also pretty nice here. You can change your aspect ratios right from within the camera. You can do video from right here. Change it to UHD 60. This is a proper high-end flagship camera setup. The problem, though, is that the post-processing of some of these photos looks a little bit over-sharpened, I feel like, and also a little bit, the colors are just a little off. They're like a softer color. Just the tones of the skin sometimes are just not accurate sometimes, but sometimes it's a more pleasing look for people. At the end of the day, though, I just wish they would have put the full S24 Ultra camera system in here, because it seems like a little bit of a step back from the S24 Ultra. I think most people buying this, though, won't really care. Just something that I care about because I like premium phones. So on the iPhone 15 Pro, I think the color tones are better. I think they're a little bit more pleasing. They're a little bit warmer looking. And you have this dedicated macro mode, which is easier to use than the macro. You'll have to do an ultra wide shot on the Samsung. So the macro mode is dedicated here, and it's just a little easier to use. If we go here to video, we have 4K 60. I don't like how with Apple, you still got to go to the settings to do stuff. It's not right here within camera. I mean, some of them are, but not all of them. You still got to go to settings to tweak some certain features. Most of what you need is in the camera, but still, if you want to go a little bit more in depth of what this camera's default settings are and all that, you got to go over here, you got to go to camera, and you got to mess around in here. They still didn't put everything front and center right in the camera settings itself. So if we go here to camera, you'll see there's no settings button to trigger that. But the actual results, especially on the front-facing camera, I mean, the skin tones are just more pleasing. However, they also do pick up my pimples and my zits a little more, so I'm not a fan of that. I like how the Samsung gives me a more pleasing, softer photo on the selfie. But if you like great skin tones, social media apps, they look better on the iPhone still, especially the video portion of that. I think you'll like the 15 Pro. Where you'll like the Samsung more, though, is the zoom and probably the super steady and stuff like that. They have action mode on the right, but the Samsung will be more of the fun camera to use. The iPhone, probably the better social media option. When it comes to the audio, the 15 Pro actually won it out. I'm not going to play a sample here because it's too early right now. There's people sleeping in my building still, so I'm going to go ahead and skip the sound portion. But I can tell you, after all this time using it, the iPhone gets a couple decibels louder and sounds slightly fuller, although the Dolby Atmos sounds pretty great. On the Samsung, I will pick the iPhone for speaker audio quality on this one. That one is the one I would pick here between these two. I gotta say, I really like the Samsung's in-display fingerprint sensor, and if you just bring it up, the face unlock triggers and goes right in. I just find this easier. You can just tap it and it just kind of knows where your finger is. It's a pretty sizable one there in the middle, so you don't miss often, unlike their cheaper phones. And then with the iPhone, you have the nice, look at the camera, comes up. I don't have raise to wake on, it looks like, but it's easy to get in as well. Face ID, very convenient with certain applications as well, but you got the fingerprint on Samsung. Both of them pretty good. Almost dropped the phones. Both of them have been pretty good. It's just a slightly different way of unlocking the phones. Okay, so let's talk about the battery life. We're looking at a 4900 milliamp hour battery. On the left, this is capable of 45 watt wireless charging. That's 65% in just 30 minutes. On the right here, we do have a pretty decent sized battery as well. We're looking at a 3274. That's pretty sizable for the size of this phone, but nothing like the Samsung at 4900 milliamp. The issue though is that the Samsung kind of needs that because the software it runs seems to drain a little bit more battery. But definitely I did find myself getting a little bit better runtime on the Samsung over the iPhone 15 Pro. It just seemed to last a little bit longer in my use. However, keep in mind that the iPhone 14 or 15 Pro Max over here is an improvement over the 14 Pro Max and probably closer to the 13 Pro Max, but not beating it when that phone came out. Both of these are a full day phone, but I think the Samsung S24 Plus is more like a day and a half phone between these two. So that's what I've experienced with these. The Samsung S24 Plus actually seems to have slightly longer battery life than the S24 Ultra in my experience as well. So this is probably the king of the S24 line when it comes to just the sheer battery, as was like last year with the S23 Plus. That was pretty similar that we've seen as well. Connectivity wise, the Samsung has won out again. In my experience, I find myself to not lose signal strength in harder to reach areas as often as I do with my iPhone. This is super annoying when you're in like a garage or underground or something like that. The Samsung tends to do a little bit better here. That's the main thing I've noticed. When you're out and about in broad daylight, walking around, broad night as well, outside basically, let's put it that way, both are easily really good. And iPhone is much better than it used to be. Let's not get it twisted. This phone is really strong and the signal strength much better than old Intel days. Wi-Fi connectivity also strong on both. However, keep in mind that the Samsung definitely still doesn't give you the 7. I think that was on the S24 Ultra, but these both give you 5.3 Bluetooth, 6E Wi-Fi, and this one does have tri-band. This one has dual band. But at the same time, you know, connectivity has been pretty close, just a slight edge to Samsung for me, mostly for that better connectivity strength. And then finally, these do come in multiple color options. This one you're seeing here is a blue color that was called Sapphire Blue, but it was also, I think it was an exclusive colors. That's why I got this like exclusive box right here. I tend to prefer the Samsung exclusive colors. But they also have like a marble gray. They have an onyx black for this one. You can get it in a cobalt violet, amber yellow, jade green. You can also get this one in black. It's called black titanium. This blue titanium you see here, natural, which is kind of the color I got for the 15 Pro Max. But after a while, it started to look a little bit dull. So I'm not going with that natural titanium no more. White titanium as well. And so let's wrap it up here. 6 months later, you've seen that in the battery, the Samsung was better. The camera, more versatile, but I would say the 15 Pro's results a little bit better. 15 Pro, definitely a little bit faster with its CPU benchmarks, but you wouldn't really notice it. I didn't talk much about performance. You wouldn't really notice it too much day to day because the Samsung has snappier animations. The 8 Gen 3 is also super powerful. It takes a good advantage with its multitasking. So even though benchmarks would win on the 15 Pro, the Samsung still seems to like be a little snappier. And the resale value is better on the iPhone. And it's down to preference on the software side. But if I only had to choose one between these two, which would it be? If I'm being honest with you, I'd probably pick the iPhone 15 Pro here because I'm going to trade in probably soon and I want my better resale value. That's about it. Also, I do like the camera better here. If it was between like the 15 Pro Max and the S24 Ultra though, that would probably be the S24 Ultra. So for me, I'm more of a fan of the Ultra than the Plus model here of the Samsung S line, but it's really close. This would be a really tough decision if I was not caring about my resale value because this is really, really close here. Just the Samsung giving you much bigger screen, usually a cheaper price, more versatility. It's probably a no-brainer for certain individuals though. So let me know your thoughts on it down below. I'll try to give you my best take on my experience with them. I want to hear what you got to say, though, down below in the comments. Thumbs up if you enjoyed it. Subscribe if you haven't already. And I'll catch you on the next one. Peace.